so-called Harp's house. The reason I say that is because if you read some of these accounts, it gives a description of the Harp's camp when they got to Harp's Hill. And it didn't match that. It wasn't just a big rock with a hole in it. It described different features, a big rock facing the west and so forth. So on one of my trespassing adventures, I just walked on down Harp's Hill to the west side toward Hopkins County. And at the end of it, there's a place that matched what I read what the posse said. I think that's the camp, but I didn't do anything about it. What could I do? I couldn't go back. I sneak around the back way. Okay, back up for me. In Mr. Rutherford's book, is this, you just won't see it now.
Yes, I do.
Okay, in Mr. Rutherford's book, this lady, this is 1855, she was born about 1790. She was the last pioneer to say that she saw Big Harp's headless body laying there in the woods after they cut it off, his head off, and took it back across the river. She saw it and wrote it, put it in his book, and he wrote it in 1913, and it's just fascinating because I'll never be able to figure it out probably. He said until 1910, an oak tree 4 feet in diameter stood on the bank of Boatyard Creek. You know about Boatyard Creek? He used to build flatboats there, the Oakses did. On the bank of Boatyard Creek near the slab road that runs from Harp's Hill to Free Henry Ford, which is rocks in the river. So my nephew and I tried to navigate that one time, and that it got so bad we couldn't do it. It's about a mile from Harp's Hill to the river. You just can't get through that. I don't think he could right now. He carved his initials on a beech tree that day, and I don't think we could ever find that beech tree. But this lady said she saw it when she was about 10 years old. So she's about 65. So that's kind of neat, just to follow it back. Okay, let's see. Well, and here's, like we're talking about all the primary evidence. Stories are great. The primary evidence. The tombstone, Esther Love's tombstone. The survey record. Click. Click. This is in Mr. Rutherford's book. The Outlaws of Cave and Rock, which I'm privileged to have a signed copy. Not too privileged, I paid $150 for it. Not that funny. This is about a week after the murders, okay? The Lexington paper, so this is primary evidence. Facsimile of news item regarding capture of Micajah Hart, Lexington, Kentucky, September 10, 1799, and later it was published in Charleston, South Carolina. The two murderers by the name of Harps, who killed Mr. Langford last winter in the wilderness and were arrested and broke the damsel Goal, which is the old name for jail, killed a family on Pond River by the name of Staple, should be Stegall, on the 22nd day of August, should be the 20th, and burnt the house. A party of men pursued and overtook them and their women. The Harps parted. Micajah Hart took 2 of the women off with him. The men pursued him and riding about 10 or 12 miles, caught him, having previously shot him, confessed the killing and so forth and so on. The day before they burnt Steagall's house, they had with them 8 horses and a considerable quantity of plunder, 7 pair of saddlebags and so forth. They cut off his head. And see, this verifies that that happened. And that's what you need, is documentation. And I've heard people say, yeah, they killed him down there at Dixon. No, they didn't. The women were taken to the Red Banks. Where is that? Henderson. What was Owensboro? Yellow Banks. He told me I need to find Shorty Watson. This is about 1990. So I found Shorty. And he said, yeah, I grew up down there. So he took me down there. And right where the marker is, just there's a house there. He took me up in the yard, and he said, my daddy's house was right here, and I grew up right here. And he was born in 1918. He said, when I was a little boy, they widened this road, 41A, about 1924. And he said, and I can barely remember before they widened it, my granddaddy pointing to a stump across the road. And that's Harp's Head stump. Well, in Mr. Collins' History of Kentucky, he wrote in 1874, the oak tree with HH on it, which was carved here in 1799, still stands, the tree. Well, when Shorty Watson was a little boy in the early 20s, the stump was still there. They come along and widened the road, took the stump out. So Shorty said, "Bud, he said, I had a neighbor, Mr. John Tapp, 1925. He said he got a big sand rock, and he carved HH 1925 on it, stuck it in the yard, over here on our side, and he said, and the stump of my head was across the road, about 25 feet straight across. I was just eating at it. I found it. Okay, that's it. Now this is down in that country. Here's Dixon, here you go. Just before you get to where 56 turns to Morganfield, right there is where the marker is. Right there is also where the rock was. Right there also, across the highway, is where the head was sitting. Okay, so that is where it happened. Okay, one more time. Now Shorty is a good man. I called him one day and he said, well, he's a carpenter by trade, he was retired. He got a 1x board. He said, let me just draw you a map of the way it was when I was a kid. He took a number 2 pencil, 41A, Tobe Watson's house, that's his father's house. Right there, HH rock. Right across the road, hung head. Okay? Tell them Big Heart's coming. Right there is the marker. And there's where the road used to go to Morganfield. That's John Tapp was
Like turn it off.
put rock up 1925. Here, I'll answer it and I'll tell them. Okay. And that board is a precious piece to me. And I'm going to share it with you. Shorty Watson made that for me in 1990. But that's the real deal. And I'm just tickled to have it. This is secret. Maybe I should have wrapped it in plastic.
It should be varnished or something because people touching it over.
All right, Russell, just by the edges. Okay. So, he said that's where it happened, and that would have happened about the 25th of August, 1799, 25th, 26th, something like that. So if you were down in that country about the 1st of September, a few days later, and rode by that place, what would you see? Something like this. Now whether they put it through his eye or not, I don't know, but it was August, and I imagine there was flying. Okay? But that is a drawing in a book over there, which is a pretty rare book I have, called Spawn of Evil, which is one of the best books about the heart. That and The Outlaws of Caving Rock, which is also Rich Rover's history. So it's all over. Of course, the head and the skull wasn't there. Randy, you're always late, but you're never this late. Right? Okay. After the head and the skull went away, I've got a little more to say about that. The stump, you see when they stuck the head on the, it's supposed to be a cherry tree, or that's what a story says. Somebody on a white, and that's the tree that stayed with HH on it, so Richard Collins saw it in 1874. Wrote about it, and that's the stump of that tree that Shorty Watson remembered that he told me about. Okay? So you had your provenance going back through there. So after this disappeared, and the stump disappeared, Shorty said Mr. John Tapp put up a rock, said HH 1925. I'd always heard of that rock, HH, nobody ever said anything about 1925. So I said, Shorty, I always heard HH. He said, I don't care what you heard. Said HH 1925. Click. Shorty Watson was telling the truth. That's in that blue book over there. So that's verification, that's corroboration, not collaboration. That's when you get together and try to hurt somebody and find actions. It's corroboration, verification. Well, this was done away with in the 60s. Somehow or another. He told me he didn't know what happened to it. Disappeared. I'm just glad there's a picture. I was down there a couple of weeks ago to get this picture. That is a marker that has been refurbished, but it sits about 20 feet from where H.H. Rock was. And right across this highway was where the stump was and where the head was stuck. Right? Big Harp's head displayed here as wanting to outlaw was about 1800. Mother and child murdered in cabin west of Dixon, a big Macajah, Little Wiley Harp. Pursued in Muhlenberg County where Big Harp was shot. Head brought here at that time, Crossroads. Harbison wives, Rome, Kentucky. Little Harp, so. Okay? All right, one more. Now, I'm about done, I promise. Have you enjoyed it okay? Yes. Okay. I've been asked to do this before. One time I was invited down to Princeton to talk about this. So I went down there and talked about it, and there was a gentleman on the front row listening pretty intently, kind of like you, Russell. And when I got through, he said, let me have your address. So I gave it to him. And in a few days, I received an envelope, a little envelope, and opened it up. There was a thing called the Journal of R.C. Love, who was a preacher. As I got to reading it, I figured out it was William Love's son, the surveyor who was killed. And he detailed in the first part of the article that his mother, Esther Love, remember the tombstone at the beginning, had received her husband's horse back. Because you see, Big Harp was riding that horse when he was caught. And he said, we got the horse back, but it was never the same, and it died within a year. It died of what's called, at that time, it was called a black down. But at any rate, Big Harp wore him out, no doubt. But it was his whole journal, and he was a minister, and he pastored in Hopkins County in different places. And the next time I was over to see Miss Love's tombstone, I noticed to the left of her, right beside her, was R.C. Love, her son. So that's more verification. Born in 1798, the year before his father was killed. So it's nice to get those little extra stories. One more that I got. Somebody gave me a thing called the Journal of Daniel Ashby. It's not the same Daniel Ashby that Hopkins County was named for. It's another one. But he married John Leeper's daughter, Cassandra. And it was his little journal. And they later moved to Missouri. But in his journal he says, when I went to the War of 1812, I took my father-in-law, John Leeper's rifle with me. The one he took on the chase after the harvest. And that's neat to have that. But the neatest thing that I ran into, in my opinion, and I've never written about this, I've never written about those other things either. Years ago, a lady I worked with, and I want to thank Teresa Ray for getting me this morning. I didn't have it, but I remembered which one it was in. West Kentucky Journal, 1997, summer 95. Good for you, Teresa. I said 97, she found it anyway. In the 1830s, there was an old lady, I don't know where she was living at the time, but she wrote her memoirs, or she was writing to her sons to detail she and her husband's life when they were young. She said, I thought you might want to read this. Let's see. The cows and the sheep would give the alarm by running around the stockade, ringing their bells around their neck. I hope the big old cowbell